This is Chapter 10 of The Unsworn Heir, written by Alexi Hart. They brought her back down from the cathedral like a trophy. Not in chains. Her wrist remained bound in the same leather cord, the same linen padding, the same careful cruelty, but with enough guards around her that the message was clear. Unsworn did not walk free in Crown Spire. Unsworn were displayed. The High Warden escorted her through the cathedral doors, his posture rigid, his jaw clenched tight enough that he can't take it back the strain in it through the bond. He didn't look back at the nave. He didn't look up at the gilded spires. He looked at her like he could taste her pulse. The bond mark answered with a slow, humiliating warmth, and the dark at the edges of the room seemed to breathe in time with them. But she felt the cold breath of the gate lingering under her skin. Felt the way her blood still hummed with its attention. As they stepped into the plaza, sunlight hit them hard, making the winter air look deceptively clean. The square was crowded now. A market had sprung up beneath the cathedral steps, vendors hawking candles, prayer ribbons, saint bones carved into charms. People moved in dense streams, shoulders brushing, voices low and careful. Then they saw her. The flow of bodies faltered. Heads turned. Murmurs rose like flies. Unsworn. Witch. Door. Heresy. She kept her chin up and her face calm because panic was a scent, and the city would devour it. But the humiliation burned anyway, hot under her ribs. A boy pointed, eyes wide. His mother slapped his hand down and hissed a prayer. An old man made the radiant sign across his chest and spat at the ground. A young woman stared with open fascination, lips parted as if she'd never seen a hunted thing up close. And as the crowd parted, fearful, hungry, the High Warden's hand tightened on her cord. "May I?" he asked, low enough only she could hear. It startled her, not because it was tender, but because he asked, even now, in the middle of a public square filled with people who believed she deserved no agency. "Yes," she whispered. His grip tightened, guiding her forward. The bond steadied with the exchange, warmth smoothing the edge of her humiliation. She hated that it helped. She hated that she needed it. They descended the cathedral steps and crossed the plaza toward the inner district. The crown quarter lay beyond, guarded by iron gates and soldiers with polished helms. As they approached the gate, a shout rose behind them. "High Warden!" A man in a fine coat pushed through the crowd, cheeks flushed from the cold and the effort. His hair was slicked back, his eyes sharp with calculation. He wore the crown sunburst on a chain at his throat, a badge meant to look like honor instead of leash. He bowed deeply to the High Warden, then turned his gaze to the Unsworn with open interest. "My lord," he said, "the regent is displeased. The High Saint has demanded the door remain in cathedral custody." The Unsworn bared her teeth. "Stop calling me that." The man ignored her as if she were furniture that spoke. The High Warden's voice was flat. "She remains under wardenate custody." The man's lips thinned. "The regent." "The regent can speak to me herself," the High Warden said. The man's gaze flicked to the Unsworn's bound wrists, then to the High Warden's face. He smiled slightly, like a gambler who had just learned someone else's weakness. "It's said you've claimed her," he murmured. Heat sparked under her ribs, sharp as a thorn. The High Warden's jaw set. "It said many things." The man's smile widened. "We have an audience waiting. The court is curious." The High Warden's gaze turned colder. "The court is always curious about suffering." "Yes," the man said, unbothered. "That is one of its charms." He stepped aside and gestured toward the inner gate. "This way. They've prepared a chamber." Prepared. A word she was beginning to hate. They passed through the gate. The Crown Quarter didn't smell like the Cathedral District. It smelled cleaner, sharper, polished stone and expensive perfumes, horse sweat and iron. The streets were wider here, the buildings higher. Carriages rolled with jeweled wheels. Guards stood at every corner, eyes hidden behind helmets that gleamed like coins. The city's decadence pressed in as heavily as its fear. Silk banners draped from balconies. Lanterns burned in colored glass. Musicians played somewhere behind a courtyard wall, their notes bright and careless. And beneath it all, she still smelled rot, subtle, old, like a stain no amount of gold could cover. The man in the fine coat led them through a series of gates and into an inner palace annex, a place that looked like comfort designed to disguise its teeth. Marble floors, tapestries depicting saints and kings, servants moving like ghosts, silent and quick. Her bound wrist drew glances. Her hood drew more. They reached a long hall lined with noblemen and priests, people in velvet and fur, people in gold and white, people with eyes sharp as knives and mouths shaped to smile. They fell silent as she entered. The High Warden paused at the threshold. His hand tightened on her cord. The bond trembled. "Remember the terms," he murmured. "I remember," she whispered. He nodded once. Then he guided her into the hall. The eyes hit her like rain. Hunger, curiosity, disgust, desire, sharp and ugly. The Unsworn kept her face calm. Inside, her blood boiled. At the far end of the hall sat the regent, on a raised dais, draped in white and black. She looked bored, as if this was merely another entertainment scheduled between meals. Beside her stood High Saint Marrow, in gold and white, her iron thorn necklace gleaming. The minister, in white velvet, hovered nearby, hands clasped behind his back, expression pleased. The court was assembled like an audience at a play, and she was the spectacle. The man in the fine coat announced, voice ringing, "The Unsworn Heir, brought in by the High Warden of the Wardenate." A murmur rippled through the hall. The regent's pale gaze slid over her, slow and evaluative. "So," she said, "this is the bloodroot problem." The words made her stomach twist. The High Warden bowed. "Your Grace." Marrow smiled serenely. "The door has awakened the gate." The regent's eyes sharpened. "Already?" Marrow's smile widened. "It is inevitable." The regent leaned forward slightly. "We will keep it closed, as we always have." She flicked her gaze to the Unsworn. "Kneel." The command hit like a slap. Heat flared in the Unsworn's belly, sharp and furious. She forced it down. She lifted her chin. No. The tether didn't punish her. It was truth. The hall went still. Someone gasped. A noblewoman in a fur mantle hid a smile behind her fan. The regent's expression didn't change. "Kneel," she repeated, voice mild, "or your warden will make you." The High Warden's grip on the cord tightened. The Unsworn felt the strain in him through the bond, like a bruise pressed too hard. She turned her head slightly, meeting his gaze. His eyes were dark, controlled. "A question there?" "A request." "Mayes." "The terms." She swallowed, anger burning. If she refused, he would be forced to act anyway, under oath, and the act would feed rot. The court would enjoy the spectacle. If she complied, she would be kneeling for her captors like a good little sacrifice. Either way, she lost. Unless she chose the manner of her losing. She breathed in, then out. and she lowered herself to one knee. Slowly, deliberately, not as submission, as strategy. The bond eased, warmth smoothing the sharp edge of the moment. The High Warden's shoulders loosened a fraction. The Regent smiled, satisfied. Good. The beast learns. The Unsworn's hands clenched in her lap. She imagined biting the Regent's throat and wondered if the taste of noble blood would be sweet. Marrow stepped closer, her iron thorn necklace clicking softly. She reached out toward the Unsworn's face again, but this time she paused. "May I?" Marrow asked, voice honeyed. Consent as theater. The Unsworn's mouth curled. "No." Marrow smiled anyway. "Then I will not." And her hand hovered, close enough that the Unsworn felt the air shift, cold and sharp. The bond tightened, reacting to the pressure. Marrow's eyes gleamed. "Your blood is loud," she murmured. "The gate hears you even now." The Unsworn's stomach twisted. The Regent's gaze flicked to the High Warden. "How stable is the thornbind?" The High Warden's voice was controlled. "Stable under chosen alignment." The Regent's pale brows lifted. "Chosen?" Marrow's smile sharpened. "A delightful complication." The minister stepped forward, voice brisk. "The solution is simple. We will keep her close to the Warden until the cleansing rite. Then we will use her blood to reinforce the seal." Use. Reinforce. Seal. The Unsworn's skin went cold. The Regent nodded, bored again. "And if she refuses?" Marrow's eyes sharpened. "Then we take what we require." The Unsworn's breath hitched. Heat flared, sharp and dangerous. The bond tightened, pain flickering under her skin. Rot stirred. The High Warden's gloved hand touched the cord, tightening it slightly. "May I?" he murmured, barely audible. "Yes," she whispered through clenched teeth. Warmth surged, steadying her. The court watched the tiny exchange with interest, as if they could see the invisible thread between them. A nobleman leaned toward another, murmuring something that made them both smile. "She leans toward him," someone whispered. "He asks her." How quaint. How obscene. Obscene. As if consent were filth. As if choice were sin. The Unsworn's throat tightened. Marrow's gaze caught the whispering nobles and softened into something that looked like pity. "You see," she murmured, addressing the Regent, "the rite is already teaching her obedience." The Unsworn laughed, low and bitter. "It's teaching me survival." Marrow's eyes brightened. "Survival is obedience in the end." The Regent lifted one hand, bored with theology. "Enough. High Warden, you will keep the Unsworn contained. You will present her at dusk for the cleansing rite." The High Warden's jaw flexed. "Your Grace, the rite will—" "Contain the rot," the Regent cut in. "That is what priests are for." Marrow's smile didn't reach her eyes. "And what wardens are for," she added. The High Warden bowed his head. "Yes." The word tasted like ash. The bond tightened at the coercion behind it. A cold flicker passed through the hall. The Unsworn felt it in her bones. Rot, subtle but present, brushing the edges of her blood like a lover's fingers. The candle flames along the walls leaned for a heartbeat, then steadied. No one seemed to notice, except her. Except him. Except Marrow, who smiled as if she had just heard a secret. The Regent leaned back, satisfied. "You may rise," she told the Unsworn. "You will remain in palace custody until dusk. The court will be entertained by your presence." Entertained. The Unsworn stood slowly, legs stiff from kneeling. The High Warden's grip on the cord remained steady. The bond hummed, warm with the remembered yes. The minister stepped closer, voice low and gleeful. You will be housed in the mirror gallery. The unsworn stomach tightened. What is that? A place of refinement, he said. A place where the court may observe you without risk. Like an animal in a cage, she murmured. The minister smiled. Precisely. Marrow's eyes gleamed. Be grateful, Door. The court could have demanded your blood now. They are choosing patience. The unsworn smile was sharp. Then I will make them regret their restraint. The regent laughed softly, the sound cold. I like her. She's spirited. Marrow's smile sharpened. Spirit breaks. The High Warden's eyes flashed. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But the bond pulsed, hot and furious, carrying his rage into her like a spark. She felt it and held it, letting it steady her instead of burn her. Because she understood now what the court had assembled to do. They weren't only watching her. They were watching him. Watching how far the crown's feared enforcer could be bent by a forbidden bond. Watching whether the weapon would keep its edge or cut its own hand. The High Warden tugged the cord once, and she followed him out of the hall, the noble's whispers trailing after them like a stink. As they passed through the palace annex corridors again, she kept her face blank and her steps steady. But inside, her blood churned. The gate was awake. The sea wanted her blood. She could feel it the way you felt a storm before it broke. Pressure in the skull, a pull under the ribs, the air turning wrong. Her mark at her collarbone heated like a warning flare, the bond humming in frantic agreement. The High Warden took her arm and didn't ask. He hauled her down a side corridor, away from the chanting acolytes and the watching eyes, into a narrow chamber meant for storage, one cot, one table, one lock that clicked shut behind them like a verdict. Silence hit hard. He turned, and the control in his face was a thin, brutal thing. Look at me, he said. She did. His gaze swept her like he was checking for injuries, for cracks, for anything the sea might have planted in her. When his eyes landed on the mark, his jaw tightened. They called consent obscene, he said, voice low, dangerous. They want you to think you have no choice. Her throat worked. Maybe I don't. He stepped closer until her back met the table edge. Not a shove. A trap made of certainty. Heat rolled off him, the kind that made her skin prickle. You always have a choice with me, he said, and the vow in it nearly undid her, even no. His hand came up and settled on her throat, not squeezing, not threatening, just holding her pulse beneath his palm like he wanted to memorize it. The bond surged in answer, shadows stirring around their feet, the room dimming at the edges, as if darkness leaned in to listen. Tell me to stop, right now, he murmured, and I will. Her breath stuttered. The part of her that was still afraid wanted to say it. The part of her that was tired of being brave whispered, Don't. Something in him cracked, softly, like ice giving way under too much weight. Say yes, he demanded, voice rough with restraint. Say it out loud. Yes, she gave him, shaking. Yes, High Warden. A sound left him that wasn't quite a growl and wasn't quite a prayer. He kissed her. It wasn't the controlled, measured kiss of the doorway. It was hunger and guilt and relief all braided together, his mouth taking hers like he'd been starving and had finally stopped pretending he could live on restraint alone. Her mark flared hot, and the bond answered with a pulse that was lightning under skin. He kept one hand at her throat as he kissed her, grounding her, forcing her to stay present. His other hand slid down her side to her waist, then lower, pressing her closer until she felt exactly how badly he wanted her. No room for denial, no room for lies. Good, he breathed against her mouth when she made a helpless sound. That's it. Stay with me. She clutched his coat, knuckles white. I am. He lifted her onto the table like she weighed nothing, spreading her knees with his body, fitting between them as if it had always been his right. The act was so possessive, it stole her breath. He paused, forehead resting against hers, eyes shut like he was forcing himself to remember something important. This is yours, he said, voice hoarse. You understand me? You're not something they get to take. Not tonight. She swallowed. Then take me first. His eyes snapped open, dark and wrecked. Again, he said, and it sounded like a plea. She nodded, and the bond hummed so hard the lantern wick on the wall guttered. He kissed her again, slower now, deliberate, letting her feel the choice in it, letting her answer, letting her chase. His mouth broke from hers, only to drag along her jaw, her throat, the sensitive place beneath the mark where her skin was already too hot. Her head tipped back. Warden. Look at me, he ordered, and she forced her eyes open, trembling with it. His gaze held hers as his hand slid under her tunic, palm flattening to her stomach. His touch was warm and steady, as if he could quiet the whole world by holding her. Her breath turned ragged. You want this, he said, not a question. Yes. Tell me what you want. She burned. She shook. She made herself say it anyway. You. I want you. His mouth twitched with something like pain. Mine, he said, and the word hit the bond like a spell. The shadows in the corners surged, curling up the walls, and her mark pulsed in fierce, delighted heat. He lowered her to the cot, following her down like a vow being kept, and for a moment, he just hovered, watching her, breathing hard, as if he needed to be sure she was still choosing him. Last chance, he murmured, thumb brushing her lower lip. Tell me to stop. She kissed his thumb, eyes locked on his. Don't. That was all it took. He undressed her with hands that didn't shake, but might have, if he let go of control. Every touch was a command and a reverence, his mouth everywhere skin was exposed, his breath hot, his praise low and relentless. Good, he whispered when she arched into him. So beautiful like this. So brave. She made a small, broken sound, shame and want mixing until she couldn't tell them apart. He stripped his own coat off and tossed it aside like it was an insult between them. Then he covered her with his body, weight warm and certain, and the bond flared so hard, she saw stars. It wasn't gentle, not exactly. It was careful in the way a blade was careful. Precision, restraint, deliberate. But the hunger in him made every kiss feel like a claim. He set a rhythm with his voice. Again, he breathed when she tried to hide her sounds. Say my name. She did, and his eyes went molten. The bond pulsed, their hearts sinking in a brutal, perfect beat. Shadows rippled under the cot like they were holding it steady. Her mark burned, then cooled, then burned again, as if it was drinking every breath he stole from her. She clung to him like a drowning woman clings to shore. He kissed her through it, letting her feel everything: want, devotion, control, the desperate sweetness of being chosen. When she broke apart beneath him, the magic in the room surged with her, heat spilling into the air, a low hum in the stones, the shadows flaring outward like wings. He followed with a harsh exhale against her throat, trembling once, then went still, forehead pressed to hers, as if he'd just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. For a breath, they only breathed. Then his hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing away the wetness at the corner of her eye, like it offended him to see it. "I've got you," he said, voice raw. "I won't let them take you." She laughed softly, broken. "You shouldn't promise things you can't keep." His eye sharpened. "Watch me." He pulled her against his chest, covering her with his body and his warmth, his arm locked around her like a shield. When the chanting outside rose again, the sound felt distant, smaller, like it couldn't touch her while he held her. The gate was awake. And now, so was the bond. She lay in his arms, marked by him, ruined for anything less, and she could taste the dangerous truth in every slow heartbeat. She would say yes, again. Or for someone to force the word out of her mouth,